Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NIL Edge, the show where people shaping the future of name, image, and likeness share what's working and how they're improving NIL opportunities for student athletes. Whether you work inside an athletic department, represent a brand, you're a student athlete, or the parent of a student athlete, this is the show for you. Each episode, we have conversations with NIL directors, brand leaders, and other innovators that are pushing the NIL space forward. We have a simple goal. We want to share real success stories, surface practical ideas, and create a trusted space for NIL strategy and education. NIL Edge is produced in partnership with NIL Newsstand and Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern. My name's Sterling Randle, and I'm your host. I come from a background in strategic communications and public relations. Before that, I worked inside collegiate athletic departments as an SID. Today, I help brands and organizations navigate change, build trust, and connect athletes, fans, and businesses together in meaningful ways. Really excited to be joined by today's guest, Jeremiah Carter from the University of Minnesota. Without further ado, let's do it. Really excited to be joined today by Jeremiah Carter, who is the Executive Associate Athletic Director for NIL and Risk Management at the University of Minnesota. With his experience coming from athletic departments and the NCAA, Jeremiah helps Minnesota build structured, athlete-centric NIL support systems. Working at the intersection of compliance, brand development, and innovative partnership strategy, that was a mouthful, Jeremiah helps student athletes at Minnesota maximize opportunities while aligning with its institutional goals as a university. Jeremiah, thank you so much for joining us, and how the heck are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, really excited. Growing up, I grew up in Big Ten country, so I have a little bit of a Big Ten bias. So I'm always excited to talk to someone from a Big Ten school. And I just want to jump right into it. We were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up at Minnesota, and how you ended up working in the NIL field in general?
Yeah, no, I've been in college athletics a long time. I actually, I feel, I tell people I was born into college athletics. My dad was a college coach when I was born, and then he was an academic advisor. Then he ran conference. He was conference commissioner at a couple of different spots. So I really, I've been around college athletics my entire life, and always wanted to be a college football player. That was, I grew up in part of my time in State College, Pennsylvania, home of Penn State, and I could almost see Beaver Stadium from my house. So that was really lots of kids dream about the NFL. I dreamed about playing college football, and moved to Minnesota when I was in high school. And at the end of that, had the opportunity to start off. I had the opportunity to walk on at the University of Minnesota with football, and just kind of gave me a chance to prove myself. Ended up earning a scholarship. I was a 2-year starter, and got done with football, and went into coaching for a couple of years, and decided that I really liked football, but I didn't necessarily like the coaching lifestyle. So from there, it was never really a question whether or not I was going to be involved in college athletics. It was just, what was I going to do? So I spent 6 years at the NCAA, worked in a number of different areas, always kind of in the legislative rules-based side. And that led me to having an opportunity to come back to Minnesota, and ended up running our athletic compliance office here, overseeing all NCAA rules for about 7-8 years, before shifting to my current role, overseeing our NIL and some risk management efforts.
I find it really fascinating that risk management is part of your title, because what is more like risk adverse than NIL, and what is more risk adverse than collegiate athletics? Can you explain to us a little bit about how the risk management part of your title and your job description?
Yeah, only at Minnesota would the only way we were going to get NIL up and running early on, honestly, was if the compliance person was doing it. That's how I kind of ended up in the role, because Minnesota is you said risk adverse college athletics, if this is college athletics risk aversion, Minnesota is a 10 on that scale. It's just not, institutionally, what we're geared to do. So, after NIL was, first allowed in 2021, I found that as the compliance director, I was getting a lot of questions from our coaches and from our staff, who really, they seemed that they just weren't able to act, right? They weren't able to take steps because there weren't clear rules in place. And that really kind of led me to the point where I said, okay, somebody has to do this. Somebody has to start pushing us, and has to be comfortable doing that. And so, with that over a series of months, I had conversations with Mark Coyle, our athletic director, who said, why don't you do it? And at that point it was, okay, that's a completely different job from what I do. It's completely different from compliance. But what parts of compliance, would come with me, and then how do we really, maintain Minnesota's approach to things, which is, being very deliberate. So the risk management part of my job is really making sure that we are weighing out all of the decisions, like all of the potential directions that something can go, before we start executing on a strategy, as opposed to let's just jump into it and see what happens. It's really weighing, what is the university take going to be? What is the, speaking with our current compliance staff, what is the compliance rules? All of those parts of it together, and making decisions to put us in the best position to be competitive.
And honestly, that sounds like it fits really well with your background in compliance and what you were also doing at the NCAA, which you briefly mentioned. And so you must be reading my mind, because you're jumping right into kind of where I want to go into. So NIL passes in 2021. Minnesota itself was really quick to get in on the NIL game, and passed it at the high school level, like almost immediately, as soon as universities were able to do it. And so tell us about how your department and your day-to-day involvement have evolved since it was first implemented in 2021 to now.
Well, kind of starting from, I leaving the compliance staff, which is, a staff of 7, right? Where, you have experts around you. You can have those conversations and engage in those conversations, to, moving into the NIL role, where, it was a department of 0 and it became a department of 1. And really kind of, from that standpoint, it was, okay, first step is just getting my arms around all of the different facets that go into NIL. And while as a compliance person, you cross over with every department, right? It's kind of unique within an athletic department. You're working with everybody, but you're not necessarily, you're an inch deep and a mile long. Whereas, I really needed to dive in and understand our licensing process. I needed to understand, fully understand our relationship with, our Gopher Sports Properties, our multimedia rights partner, fully understand what our marketing staff efforts were. And that took some time to really kind of understand all of that, understand how it fits together. And then really, hopefully at that point, then I was in a good position to help our student athletes navigate it first and foremost, but then also, working with 2 folks who were looking to start a collective at Minnesota, really doing everything I can. I was allowed to do, to help kind of guide them through that process, and to work with the university, and to navigate kind of the high walls of the university that are can be confusing and have a lot of layers to them.
Again, we're on such a same page right now. So it's funny that you say that about compliance, that it touches everything. because I think NIL is the exact same way, right?
Yeah.
It's communications, it's compliance, it's at some schools they've mentioned their academic services have gotten involved. How do you do it, and how does Minnesota especially make sure that everybody is aligned day to day and month to month and year to year?
Yeah, that's something where, one, I think it's everyone is interested in NIL, right? That is the interesting thing, coming again, very different. I've experienced a very different reaction when I come into the room now, versus when I came into the room as a compliance person, right? It's a very, very different dichotomy, right? Where, now it's really, people want to understand, right? It's the first year or two spent most of my time not only kind of explaining NIL, which was, it was this new thing for donors. It was this new thing for staff, and people were trying to understand it, but, it wasn't exactly like anything else. So it was a lot of trying to kind of break down what's going on. But then the other piece of it was to really try and light a fire under people to understand that it is going to take action for us to be successful in the NIL field. And we need to be successful in the NIL field if we want to continue to be competitive in all arenas. And so that was really kind of the first push. Now, people have a much better understanding. But I still find that, you come into rooms and it's, okay, how long has it been since I talked to you about NIL? If it's more than, 2 or 3 days, here are the things that have changed. Here's the direction we're going. Here is the strategy for moving forward, and making sure that people are on board and aligned and understand, not just the what, but also the why.
That leads exactly into my next question. We must have had the same thing for breakfast today. So going towards the why, but switching that why to the student athletes, how does Minnesota teach student athletes that NIL is just more than just like doing something and getting paid for it, but it moves to personal branding, career development, learning about financial literacy? How does Minnesota package all those things together?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was able to kind of approach the NIL space, where a lot of schools, including Minnesota, before I was really operating the NIL, jumped to try and buy products that would essentially, take care of the NIL thing for them, right? Whether that was a service here, service there, where it's just, we don't really know how to do it, so we're going to buy services, right? But we found that our student athletes weren't using those services, right? You can require them, not require them, make them optional, make them available, but ultimately, if the athletes aren't using them, then it's not, it's not worthwhile for us. But when we're able to take a step back and really kind of look at it critically, it really does come down to, it's not new. It's what we've been teaching our athletes, right? The way that you present yourself online, what your LinkedIn profile looks like, what your social media profile looks like. We've been talking to them about that for 10 years in, our student athlete development space, right? Your career after sports. It really came down to NIL, an NIL opportunity. It's a job. It's just, it's a job, right? We know how to work with student athletes to put them in the best position to get jobs. Whether we are talking to them about their personal brand for trying to go out and get an NIL opportunity, or talking to them about their personal brand to try and go out and get the job that they're going to get for the next 4 or 40 years, it's really the same basic tools. And so that comes down to maybe an adjustment in messaging a little bit, but it's not really a huge shift in what we are delivering to them.
I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this next question the best way. So how do those conversations happen? Is it one-on-one conversations in your office with athletes? Is it a class that they're taking that they get credit for? Is it just like a seminar that's optional? How do you guys set up the student athletes for success?
Yeah, so we have a couple of touch points. So first and foremost, we've got a class that all student athletes take when they're freshmen, when they come in. If they come in during the summer, it's a summer class. If they come in during the fall semester, then they start in the fall semester or spring semester. We have student athletes starting all the time. There are a lot of different things that they learn in that class over the course of the semester, but we view that really as step one in career development for the student athletes, where they are starting, just from a starting point, not just what's expected of you in class, but it's your first day on campus. Put a resume together, right? How do you network with people? How do you present? How do you present yourself? How do you brand yourself? And we're able to, spend the semester kind of hitting on that in different points. Then as a sophomore, we're actually, planning for it right now. We have the sophomore summit, and that's really a 1-day piece where it's, hey, we haven't required you to do anything since that class your freshman year, but we're just going to have a 1-day touch point where we're going to bring in, people from different fields, former student athletes, to talk about their experience. But also we're going to work with you to build, continue to build on your brand. Every year we have something called Pro Day that occurs in the fall. And that's all student athletes. We bring in, it started out as a career fair, but it's certainly grown to more of that. And we've gone to more programming where we are in those places. The career fair, does a sophomore really need to talk to a company about getting a job 3 years in advance? It's not front of mind for them. So instead it's kind of evolved into, we have this time with you. What skills can we give you to help evolve your personal brand? But then we also do, just like I assume every campus, we have student athletes who come in all the time and just say, I want more NIL deals. And in those cases, it's, who doesn't like job, right? I mean, it's another opportunity to earn money. Let's do it.
Yeah.
We have, we'll sit down one-on-one with them and kind of really try and get at, okay, what's the end goal? Is it just a matter you need more money? Because, to be honest with you, there are easier ways to make dollars. Just go out and get a job, right? NIL is something that you have to want to do. And if you want more NIL deals, tell student athletes, there's really, there's two ways to get offered more NIL deals. You either have to play better or you have to post better. Play better, it's all about name recognition. If you're playing better, you're up for preseason awards, you're up for postseason awards, people are going to know you better. Companies are going to know you better. There's less work you have to do off the field to increase your visibility because you've done that with your actions on the field. As somebody who, it took me multiple years to actually get onto the field, that's not the only avenue though. You can also post better, which by that, we explain, you have to be a content producer. That really is what it comes down to. And it's a lot of work. If you want to do it and you're interested in it, awesome. We will give you the tools. We got a podcast studio. We've got cameras that they can check out and microphones that they can check out. We can give you the tools and the knowledge to do it, but you have to want to do it. if you don't want to put the effort in, if you don't want to put the time in, or you don't understand how much time it takes to create good content, then go out and get a job, or let's go work on your jump shot, right? Though, because it's going to be one of those two things.
I think that might be an apparel opportunity. Play better, post better. I love that.
Trademark. So there, no.
You mentioned earlier your MMR, right?
Yeah.
And I think universities' NIL offerings are only as good as the relationship the university has with their MMR partner and the relationship that they have with their collective, right? Like it's the three-headed monster, right? Yeah. And if those three aren't like synced together, I don't think you're going to be successful. And a lot of the guests that we've had on our show have talked about how they have great relationships between all three of them, and each knows where it's to make a metaphor of it, it's they all know where their teammates are on the field, right? And they know where they're going to be when each of them does or doesn't have the ball. So to you, and you don't have to go into detail, but like, what does a healthy, productive relationship look like between those three? What are the key areas of success that you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think you hit on it with it's a great analogy, is that knowing where your teammates are on the field. Really, it's when our collective launched, and it was a conversation with our MMR partner as well. I would say the first couple months was just us trying to figure it all out, right? Feel our way around. What really allowed us to start working really, really well together was when we took a step back and said, okay, what does everybody do well? Focus on that. Our MMR is the folks at Go for Sports Properties have amazing relationships with companies that want to work with Minnesota and that are already working with Minnesota. Those companies don't need somebody that they don't know, a collective, calling and trying to get deals, right? Even if it's not partners we already work with. Outside companies, I think what our collective found was when they started to make those phone calls, inevitably, by the time you got to, you got any interest, by the time you got to the second or third question, it was already a question of marks and logos. And then it's send them to the MMR, right? So, those proactive, like outgoing sales calls, didn't got to a point where it's very quickly, the return on investment's not going to be there. Okay. And we already have this group that's really, really good at it and has these long-standing relationships in our community. So what the MMR didn't have that the collective did have was the relationship with student athletes. So, the two things that take the most time with NIL are content and communication, right? Creating content and communicating with student athletes. Do you want to do this deal? Yes or no? Okay. How much are you going to be charged? Scheduling student athletes, reminding them to make sure that they show up on time, calling them when they don't show up on time, making sure that the post happens, tracking that. All of the student athlete communication pieces were things that our collective had developed really good systems for being able to handle. So, as we really kind of step back to assess it, it was, okay, our MMR works with companies, our collective works with student athletes. They can talk to each other very easily to make sure that those things are aligned. And we're not duplicating, we're not duplicating positions, right? Where, you don't have salespeople with a collective and salespeople with the, with the MMR. You don't have people handling student athletes on both cases. So it really ends up being really clear communication between really all of those points to make sure that we're set up best for success.
When those conversations are being had with brands, right, at the local or national level, what's your what's the like the golden ticket that you guys present to people when you're offering working with Gopher student athletes?
Yeah, again, I'll go back to something I said earlier, which is, I think that too often we fall in within college athletics. We fall into this thing where we feel like this is brand new, right? This is the first time this ever. NIL isn't new. Paying athletes for it is new, but NIL isn't new. And companies, to a large extent, have already been engaging in NIL for 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't necessarily recognize it as NIL, right? So, I was a history major in college, so I'm always looking at kind of the history of things and approaching it. Behind me, I've got, a couple things that remind me of where we are with NIL, right? And one of them is, I've got a promotional basketball card from, 1998 with one of our Gopher student athletes on it and a Coca-Cola logo on it. That's NIL. They didn't get paid for it, but that's NIL, right? Coke was already doing NIL in 1998, right? It to a large extent, the sales pitch hasn't changed. You are getting great reputation of the University of Minnesota, enhanced by the great reputation of our student athletes. And with that, when we're putting those two things together, it increases the value to your brand. It also increases the value to the University of Minnesota brand. Every time we have a student athlete on a billboard wearing our marks and logos, and a commercial company is not only paying for that ad to be up, but they're also paying us and paying the student athlete. That's just a win-win across the board for all of us. So the sales pitch hasn't necessarily changed. It's just helping as many companies as possible to understand all of these great things that you've enjoyed with working, the positive benefits of working with the University of Minnesota. NIL is just, another layer on top of
that. Speaking of, brands paying Minnesota and Minnesota student athletes, are there any particular trends that you're seeing in types of brands that you guys are working with? I'm sure there's student athletes that come in and they're like, I want to deal with Jordan Brand, or, how can we get a deal with Chipotle? So there's going to be those, I don't know if we want to call them like white whales or unicorns that every student athlete wants to chase after, but what trends are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we've always, we based in the Twin Cities. I know, it usually doesn't come to mind with people, but we are surrounded by Fortune 500 companies. 3M, is Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, right? Like, Cargill, so many companies that are at that Fortune 500 level. But with that being said, we're not spending a ton of time chasing the Fortune 500 companies. They have a global reach, right? Yeah. Our the folks in, the ag sector is big in the state of Minnesota, right? So it's, agriculture, farming are all things that kind of are embedded in our kind of corporate culture. They're just as interested in selling, a new seed strain to farmers in India as they are to selling them in Minnesota. So it's not necessarily just the right fit because they're a Minnesota company to have Minnesota athletes associated with it. We spend most of our time talking to, medium-sized businesses, small, medium-sized businesses whose target market is Minnesota, right? Is Minnesota fans and people in the state of Minnesota. And there are lots of those too. So our focus with those in the ag sectors there, having a little bit of a tough time right now with some of the stuff that's going on in the broader economy. But, anything where the company's target is people in the state of Minnesota, that's really where we find our highest level of interest of wanting to work with our student athletes.
Going back to what we talked about earlier, I find your point about saying that NIL's like been around forever. Now that the student athletes are getting paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
That blew my mind, and I've been thinking about that ever since you said that a couple of minutes ago. So as we move in, we moved into the NIL era just a couple of years ago, and now we just moved into the rev share era, which are those two things are astronomically different and new from anywhere collegiate athletics has been since its inception.
Yeah.
What have been some of the misunderstandings and misconceptions that you have had to help kind of dispel internally and externally when you've been working with businesses and brands at the local and national level?
Yeah, it's been an interesting, period of time over the last, really kind of 9 months. It's, so much of it is helping to kind of focus the attention of the company, right? Because NIL gets a lot of play, and it both on one side gets blamed for everything that's wrong in college athletics, and it also gets credited for all of these things that that's not right. We're too far in the extremes in both in describing what NIL does for people. But what has been really interesting is, even though we're in this space where NIL Go is required for every student athlete for deals over $600, every deal has to go through there. We're in that space on the NIL third party deal side, and with the really the institutional NIL revenue share. What's been interesting is coaches, athletes, agents, media, they're still all talking about it as one thing, as one number, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when you see, there've been countless news reports with different, college teams around the country, football teams, that what they're preparing to spend for their, for their roster next year, right? Yeah. Especially with coaching searches, that always seems to find its way in. Now, you got to take everything you read with a grain of salt. If it's public, it's, probably not on the nose, but when people see, this team is going to have a 25 or a $30 million roster, but how does that work? Because the whole cap is only 20 million this year, right? Yeah. It's one number. And it really is trying to sort out the difference between the two, and that it's really two numbers, but nobody wants to talk about it as two numbers. And the challenge for NIL folks who talk to lots of folks across the country, it's still being treated as just kind of one and the same thing.
Yeah.
And with NIL Go, we're now in a space where we have to make sure that the athletes, agents, parents understand NIL. Every single thing you do in NIL has to create value for the brand. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're not going to do it, and it's not going to clear NIL Go. So, yeah, I know maybe a year ago you didn't have to do 10 hours of work to get this one thing done, but this year you do. And you want that pay or you don't on the NIL side. So it's trying to help as many people as possible understand kind of the new rules of the road for NIL and what it means. We have to create value in the things that we do on the NIL side. Otherwise, we're going to wreck relationships with our partners, and stuff's not going to get cleared through NIL Go.
I love football and I love basketball, but I feel like we talk about those two like way too much when we talk about NIL.
Yep.
And as we've been talking to people, there's so many great examples that we've heard. South Carolina talked about softball, Boise State talked about women's soccer, Florida talked about women's lacrosse. At Minnesota, what is one sport outside of football and basketball that's really making waves? And not to make it too like personal, but do you mind sharing an example with us?
Yeah, it doesn't make waves because the water's frozen, right? It's hockey, man. We are Minnesota is the state of hockey, self-proclaimed, but I don't see anybody trying to fight us for that title. But it is we have in both men's and women's ice hockey. We have a fan base that is, in my opinion, unmatched in college hockey, period. It's even with the Wild, in town, right? Like you can hop on the light rail train and in 15 minutes, you can be from our arena to the Wild's ice arena. And yet every weekend that we have a home match, we're selling out one of the largest arenas in college hockey. People are winter's long, man. You got to do something, right? So it's hockey, hockey. So we have separate arenas for men's and women's ice hockey.
Okay.
So they each have their own home arena, connected underground by a tunnel, so the Zamboni can drive back and forth. But it's a separate arena. But where that's been, really beneficial on the NIL side is because of the popularity of hockey, there are lots of brands that want to tie in with that. There are lots of brands that want to be associated with the University of Minnesota and the tremendous tradition and history that we have in both of our hockey programs, and being competitive, top 10 teams nationally, pretty much year in, year out. There it's a matter of figuring out how best to pair up the brands with the athletes. And having those deals available, but we a little bit unique within the Big Ten, but we have local television broadcast that's not the Big Ten network that we're able to do for a number of things, and with that, we also kind of work with the ad inventory there a little bit. So really trying to get into you're for a recruiting pitch for student athletes, you're not going anywhere else where you're going to be in TV commercials as a hockey student athlete, but you will at Minnesota. So that's really been, it's been fun to see that grow.
Without putting you on the spot, is there a recent NIL deal that really captures like the essence of what Minnesota is trying to represent in their and you're trying to do with NIL as a whole at the University of Minnesota?
Yeah, I do. I think there are a couple campaigns that come to mind. With most of them, it really comes down to trying to fit the. Too often we want to work backwards and start with, we need to get X amount of money in NIL deals to this location, right? To this player or this team, whatever it may be. So let's figure out a way to do that exactly, right? And that takes a lot of time. Minnesota's always been, a broad-based success program, right? We invest time and resources, across the board in our sports, understanding that basketball, hockey, and then also for us, volleyball and men's and women's ice hockey are all really kind of our premier sports that we always have to be focused on. but we don't just stop the conversation at those. So, one NIL deal that we did last year, and then we're getting ready to roll out again this year, is with Sun Country Airlines. They are, they're a local, based in the Twin Cities. They've got a plane with the Minnesota logo on the side, and they really, wanted to be involved in a deeper level, with our university, with our athletic department, and with our student athletes. And so last year we rolled out, we opened it up to all student athletes across, we have 600 student athletes across 22 sports, and any student athlete could apply for credit on the airline to purchase flights. Cool. And to apply, what they had to essentially lay out is, what are you going to do with this? Why would receiving these flights be meaningful to you? How is it going to improve your experience in some ways? And that allowed our student athletes to really kind of dig in, be creative, and individualize it to themselves, right? So we had student athletes who were from out of state, and use the flights to bring their parents in to watch a home game, right, from out of state. We had student athletes who are from Minnesota who used it to fly their parents to an away game. A lot of student athletes wanted to tell their personal story of why they needed to go someplace warm in spring break, and so they did that as well, right? We told them to leave the spring break footage off, but just otherwise walk us through the process. And, we ended up, I think we ended up with over, last year, we had over 65 student athletes take advantage of that and do their own, micro campaign, right? Where it's, ended up being tremendous value to the brand, to Sun Country Airlines, because it's not just the same post and tagline over and over again. It was really this organic across 6-7 months. This organic storytelling that was in the hands of the student athletes. We're going to roll that out again this year for our student athletes, and expect to see similar and more creative results.
My application would have just been warmth.
Yep.
I know you've been here for a while, so I'm going to wrap it up here with our last couple of questions. So you can answer this question from like an administrative standpoint, a student athlete standpoint, or from a brand standpoint. But what skills do you believe are going to define success in the area of NIL as we move into like NIL 2.0?
Yeah. Well, when I think about it, I'm obviously, I'm always going to be thinking institutional first, right? From the institution's standpoint, what is it going to take for us to be successful in this new era? Mm-hmm. And that really comes down to understanding that we can't sit back and wait for brands to come forward and say they want to work with this athlete or that athlete. That is not going to work in most of our programs these days. That what they're up against from a recruiting standpoint, is there's a lot more out there. So, we have to be proactive, and we have to have a strategy that is going to put us in the best position possible. And part of that does really kind of come back to not only, not thinking that we have to come up with a completely, we're starting from zero and we have to do everything. Let's look at everything we do right now. Let's look at everything we've been doing. What makes sense as NIL, right? What already is NIL that maybe we're not seeing, right? Thinking about it from that standpoint of, everything can be NIL, right? It's, I'll sit down, Tommy Jensen's our nutritionist. He runs our nutrition center here. And, Tommy does a great job of coming forward and saying, hey, you know what, we got this new brand in who's doing this locally grown meat, and athletes seem to enjoy it, and it's been a good partnership for us. Okay, how do we put NIL in that, right? How do we get NIL in there with that company so that we can let the student athletes tell their own story of engagement with that? It's all around us. We have to be able to efficiently see it and capitalize on it. And if we do that, we focus on doing that and focus on what we know. There has been so much change, on a daily basis for so long that it's easy to say, I just, I don't know what we're going to do, right? It's easy to feel frozen. What we have tried to focus on is what are the things that we know, no matter what, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, we're still going to be doing, right? We're still going to have, brands associating themselves with the University of Minnesota. We're still going to have that valuable brand. We need to protect that. And we need to make sure that student athletes are a part of telling the story of our brand, and also part of telling a story of the outside brands and partners that we work with. And that was true 15 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's going to be true 5 years from now. So we invest our time and resources into making those systems better, making the student athletes better representatives in that system and better able to tell their story and their brand. And as long as we stick to that, then, it might not be as flashy as some of the programs that are announced out there, but it's gonna keep us in the game.
So our last two questions here, and these are ones that we ask everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us your favorite NIL deal that you've seen either out there in the wild or one that you've been a part of at Minnesota.
It's tough. That is it. It is always going to be really hard to look anywhere else and say I like that one. So I'm going to stick with we have been since it was actually the very first company to do NIL deals with student athletes at the University of Minnesota. It's at Ottertail County, Minnesota. It's a county tourism bureau that saw the opportunity in 2021 and jumped right in and have stuck with it ever since. And what they've done that's just a ton of fun is they bring student athletes up there in different times of the year and give them the experience, what it's like being there. And in the summertime, that means you're out on a boat fishing, and you're enjoying the nice weather and enjoying town, the lake life that people love so much. But in the wintertime, you're also out on that lake fishing. You're just not in a boat. You're in you're in an ice house. You got a hole cut in the ice and you're fishing. So, we had 2 years ago, Max Brosmer was a incoming transfer quarterback who was selected by them, and he's from Georgia, raised in Georgia. And so, his very first thing, he was out there ice fishing. It is always fun, number one, for somebody who's never walked on a frozen lake before, to see them, walk out. It's like, okay, tell me when we're out on the ice. And it's like, we've been on the ice for a half mile already. Like, to see this, we have fun in the winter too. Got to do it. Got to get outside. So that's by far been my favorite one that kind of comes up year over year.
You're also the perfect one to answer this question because, like we previously mentioned, you went to school at Minnesota. So let's say I were to come visit. I've never been to campus before. Mm-hmm. I've never been in this hypothetical situation. I've never been to the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. Where are you taking me? Where's the go-to food spot that you're going to be like, okay, this is what you're going to remember your time going and visiting Minnesota is like?
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I always tell people about the Twin Cities that, folks that have never been here before, is the Twin Cities Metro. It really is. It's like choose your own adventure, right? Yeah. What do you like doing, right? Because whatever it is, we've got it. you like going to Broadway shows? We've got them. You like going to professional? We have NBA, WNBA, NHL, professional women's hockey. We have Major League Soccer. We have Major League Baseball. We have minor league baseball, and we have 22 sports at the University of Minnesota. So we have, first-class art museums and food that is from, made by people from, every corner of the world. So it really is, what do you like doing? What do you want to do? We can make that happen in a day, right? Now on campus, we have a place called Al's Breakfast that has been going, for a very, very long time. Al's Breakfast is, I think at one point it was an alley that they just put bricks on either side. So there are, I think there are about 12 or 13 lunch counter spots. There's a counter, and then they're cooking the food on the griddle right there. And on game days, there's a line out on the street because there's no room to wait inside. And it is that is an unforgettable experience. And if you're a breakfast person, can't get much better than that. But you do have to eat quick because somebody is standing behind you ready to go and take your seat.
I love it. I'm definitely added that to my my Minnesota bucket list. Well, Jeremiah, we really appreciate you joining us and taking the time to tell us about what's going down at the University of Minnesota and Sky-Yuma.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much again to Jeremiah for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, Sterling Randle, feel free to do so on LinkedIn. If you'd like to find more episodes, you can find those on nilnewsstand.com. You can also find more episodes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can find out more about Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern at hpldigitalsport.com. And you can find out more about Digital Sport by Hot Paper Lantern and NIL Newsstand on LinkedIn. Hope everyone has a fantastic day, and thank you so much for joining us.